Next, global markets have been volatile again this week, once again because of Donald Trump. Yuka Roy from our business desk joins us for more. Yuka.
Well, Mark, Monday saw a sharp sell-off in US stocks, bonds and currency after Donald Trump ramped up his attack on Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. The president called him a major loser and urged him to preemptively cut interest rates to boost growth. This following last week's comments by Powell that Trump's tariffs would likely drive up prices and slow the economy. The relationship between the two men has long been contentious, but as the president again started publicly calling for firing Powell, it sparked concern that the Fed's independence was under threat. Economists agree that the stability and credibility of the US economy hinges on the Federal Reserve being able to pursue its dual mandate of maximum employment and price stability based on data and not on political goals. Countries with politicized central banks have often experienced higher inflation and currency instability. Now, Wall Street has rebounded sharply this Tuesday, though, on news that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told investors there would be a de-escalation in US's trade war with China. The Dow Jones jumped 1,000 points. The Nasdaq earlier gained more than 3%. Safe haven asset gold has come down since rising to $3,500 per ounce mark on Monday, although it's still up by about 30% since the start of the year. The US dollar continues to be weaker. It hit a 7-month low against the Japanese yen earlier on Tuesday, Mark.
Yuka, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Davide Romelli, who's Associate Professor in Economics at Trinity College in Dublin. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm wondering, given the context that Jerome Powell is facing, what would you do if you were in his shoes right now?
Well, I will keep his approach that has been to defend the independence of the Fed. So he arrived to say, despite the many attacks, that the Fed will not bend to any political pressure from U.S. president, and he is aware of the fact that markets, participants, and also households are fully aware of the fact that the firing of the chair of the Federal Reserve Bank will be an unprecedented event in the history of the US and many advanced economies. Indeed, when we think about the firing of central bank governors, we'll typically think about countries like Argentina and Turkey, but we'd never think about advanced economy experiencing a similar situation. So he is aware of the facts of his power, that is the economic power of influencing expectations. And I think he is also aware of the fact that even the economic advisors of President Trump will advise him against firing Jerome Powell, simply because the economic consequences could be much worse than the potential short-term benefit. So thinking in terms of what could happen in terms of economic consequences, we know for sure that already when it happened during the first mandate with President Trump putting pressure on Powell, every tweet was basically associated with an increase in inflation expectations. So in this context of high uncertainty, it will be more likely, I don't want to say a catastrophe, but it will be a cataclysm for financial markets, which could also bring strong depreciation of the US dollar and an increase in the interest rate on US government bonds.
Some people, Davide, would say that's happening already as a whole mess created by Trump's policies. Who is it that's whispering in the president's ear that's telling him to do these kind of things? Because surely this is a strategy. It's not just something he does arbitrarily.
Well, it's difficult. So every president of the United States has typically a council of economic advisors that are typically top economists from top US or European universities, which are leading scholars in their field. But it seems that with this president, the story works in a very different way, that probably he asks some advice to the Council of Economic Advisors, but he then takes the decision on his own. So when we think about the worst damage that can be done by a president to the economy is increase uncertainty. And over the last less than 3 months, we have seen an unprecedented increase in uncertainty, back and forth policies in tariff. And I will not be surprised if tomorrow things calm down with Powell, and at the next meeting, there will be another firestorm on him.
What you're saying, Davide, sounds incredibly reasonable, and Donald Trump often is not incredibly reasonable. I'm not being political here. I think it's just factual. We can say that. That's the way he is. Do you think in some ways looking to make Jerome Powell the scapegoat for what he's done wrong? For what Trump's done wrong?
Well, I think this is a very good point in the sense that this uncertainty is certainly influencing the ability of the Fed to predict inflation. And for one reason or for the other, Jerome Powell was also criticized in 2022, 2023, when he dubbed inflation as transitory, where we have seen that it reached close to 9% in the US, and we had similar problem in Europe. So already by acting this way, he's already undermining the ability of the Fed to control inflation. Trying to think in a rational way, and we assume that there is a rational thinking, we could say that the policy and this political pressure by President Trump as a double objective. On one side, puts the pressure on the Fed to lower the key policy rates, which could potentially lower the value of the US dollar and reduce the trade deficit the US dollar has. And on the other side, also lowering the interest rates on the T-bills. Is common history and common knowledge right now that the US in the next 2 years will have to refinance a large part of his debt on international financial markets. To me, one of the elements that is not considering is the fact that international investors and even domestic investors, as soon as they will fear that any interference on the independence of the Fed will increase inflation expectations, will have a negative effect on the US government bonds. So rather than having the fact that Trump is expecting of lowering the pressure in terms of interest on the US government bond, he could see the very opposite effects and potentially even trigger a short-term financial crisis on the T-bills.
Davide Romelli, watch this space is the message I'm hearing, and we will. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Davide Romelli, Associate Professor in Economics at Trinity College in Dublin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The US and India are moving towards a trade deal. This according to J.D. Vance. Yuka.
That's the US Vice President. He continues his tour of India with his family a day after he met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India. In a speech in Jaipur, Vance touted progress made towards a new bilateral agreement and claiming ongoing efforts to rebalance global trade would greatly benefit India. He also warned that if the two countries failed to work together successfully, the 21st century could be a, quote, very dark time for all humanity. Luke Schrager has more.
US Vice President J.D. Vance has given the clearest indication yet that India could be on course for a trade deal with Washington.
We are especially excited to formally announce that America and India have officially finalized the terms of reference for the trade negotiation. I think this is a vital step toward realizing President Trump's and Prime Minister Modi's vision, because it sets a roadmap toward a final deal between our nations.
Vance's visit is being closely watched in India for any sign of how it might fare against a backdrop of trade upheaval and looming tariffs from Washington. Donald Trump announced earlier in April that Indian exports would be subject to a 27% levy before putting them on hold for 3 months. Discussions between the US President and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in February outlined a $500 billion bilateral trade target for 2030, more than doubling current levels. Vance, while making a personal visit to India with his family, has given a good impression, with Washington likely seeing India not just as an ally in its drive to limit Chinese influence, but as a potential purchaser of US defense technology and energy.
We welcome the Modi government's budget announcement to amend India's civil nuclear liability laws, which currently prevent US producers from exporting small modular reactors and building larger US-designed reactors in India. There's much that we can create, much that we can do together.
Modi, for his part, may be hedging his bets when it comes to Indian energy security. The Indian leader left on Tuesday for his own visit to energy superpower Saudi Arabia.
And the Trump administration has also ramped up its trade dispute with China.
Well, this time the administration is targeting China's supply chain in the key sector of renewables. The Commerce Department has announced plans to impose tariffs as high as 3,521% on imports of solar panels from Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam and Malaysia. The decision comes after a year of investigation into a case brought by several American manufacturers during the Biden administration, accusing Asian exporters of unfairly benefiting from Chinese subsidies and flooding the US market with cheap products. The more than 3,500% tariff would effectively shut the American market for solar cell exports from these countries. Critics of the crackdown say tariffs would harm US solar producers because they would make imported cells that are assembled into panels more expensive. A separate US agency, the International Trade Commission, will vote in June on whether to give the final go-ahead to the new levies.
And amid the chaos caused by Donald Trump's trade policy, the International Monetary Fund has downgraded its outlook for the world economy.
Global economic growth will be slower and China's deflationary woes will worsen as a result of Donald Trump's tariffs and the uncertainty they have created. That's the view of the International Monetary Fund as it trimmed its outlook for global GDP growth this year to 2.8% from its January forecast of 3.3%. It expects US economic growth to come in at just 1.8%, down sharply from its previous forecast of 2.7%. As for China, the IMF expects 4% growth this year. In its twice-yearly Global Financial Stability Report, the IMF warned that risks have increased significantly since its last report last autumn, driven by uncertainty around trade policy and geopolitical tensions. His chief economist Pierre-Olivier Garinches speaking earlier.
The uncertainty in trade policy and in policy generally right now is a big drag on global activity. If you're a multinational right now, where to source your products from, where to expand in terms of your markets, you're pausing everything. You're not doing any of these things. So this is actually weighing down on both. So bringing back stability, clarity, predictability to the trading system is the first order of business.
And that's it from the business desk.
Yuka, thank you very much indeed. Yuka back with more business, of course, as we go through the evening. Great to see you. We take a very short break. After that, the news continues here. Prime News Paris.